In ancient China, over 2,000 years ago, farmers documented a watering method so efficient it required filling a vessel once every 7 days to sustain an entire growing season. The technique appeared in one of the first agricultural texts ever written. It described burying unglazed clay jars in the earth and letting the soil decide when plants needed water. No pumps, no timers, no daily labor, just pottery and physics. The method spread across continents. Persian engineers refined it. Native American tribes in the desert Southwest perfected it. Early American homesteaders used it to survive droughts that killed conventional farms. Then, in the 1960s, it vanished. When modern drip irrigation systems entered the market, the buried jar method quietly disappeared from agricultural extension bulletins and university textbooks. It was not erased because it failed. It was erased because the clay pot business model had a fatal flaw. You only had to buy it once. We have been sold a narrative that modern irrigation requires complex infrastructure, ongoing maintenance contracts, and technical expertise. But what if the most efficient watering system ever developed costs less than a dinner plate, requires zero electricity, and works better the longer you ignore it? Here is the ancient technology that threatened to make a $7 billion industry obsolete. Welcome to Nature's Lost Vault. The earliest written record of this technology appears in the Fan Shengji Shu, a Chinese agricultural manual compiled during the Han Dynasty more than 2 millennia ago. The instructions are remarkably specific. Make 530 pits per hectare. Bury an earthen jar holding 6 liters in the center of each pit. Let the jar mouth be level with the ground. Fill the jar with water. The text does not explain why this works. It simply documents that it does. Farmers across ancient China followed these instructions for centuries, not because they understood the capillary physics, but because the harvests proved the method. The jars watered crops through the driest months. They reduced labor to a single refill per week. They prevented the disease pressures that came from surface moisture. This was not just a Chinese secret. It was a global survival strategy. By the time this knowledge reached the Mediterranean, Persian engineers had adapted the technique for arid climates. Archaeological evidence shows buried irrigation vessels throughout ancient Mesopotamia. In pre-Columbian America, the Hohokam people of what is now Arizona developed sophisticated buried pot networks that supported agriculture in one of the harshest environments on Earth. When Spanish colonists arrived in the 1500s, they did not find struggling subsistence farmers. They found irrigation systems that had sustained populations for 1,000 years without modern technology. It was standard practice. Where water meant survival, the buried jar was king. So why did we stop using it? The science behind the method is deceptively simple. It relies on a force called soil moisture tension. Unglazed terracotta clay is porous. At a microscopic level, the wall of the pot is a semi-permeable membrane. When you bury it and fill it with water, you create a hydraulic system that operates on demand. Here is the critical mechanism. When the soil around the jar is dry, moisture tension increases. That pressure pulls water through the clay walls. But as the soil becomes saturated, the tension decreases. The seepage slows down. When the ground is fully wet from rain, the seepage stops completely. The system is self-regulating. It responds to actual plant need, not human guesswork or a pre-programmed timer. Plant roots figure this out quickly. If you dig up a buried jar after a growing season, you will find a dense mat of roots wrapping around the clay surface. The plants are not passively receiving irrigation. They are actively drawing it out through root pressure. It is the only irrigation system in the world that adapts to weather, crop size, and time of day without a single microchip. The efficiency of this low-tech solution is staggering. Research by David Bainbridge at the University of California, Riverside quantified what farmers had known for millennia. Buried clay pot irrigation achieves water use efficiency between 50 and 70% better than traditional surface watering. The University of Arizona confirmed these findings in controlled trials. In sandy soils with high drainage, water savings reached 70% compared to surface irrigation. Because the water is released below the surface, evaporation loss is zero. Runoff is zero. But the most surprising data comes from a study in India measuring weed pressure. Weeds need surface water to germinate. In fields using surface irrigation, researchers measured 465 kilograms of weed biomass per hectare. In the buried pot plots, only 62 kilograms. Surface watering feeds weeds. Subsurface delivery feeds only the crop. By every objective metric, water conservation, weed suppression, and yield, the ancient jar wins. And that was the problem. By the 1960s, a shift occurred that had nothing to do with science and everything to do with economics. Drip irrigation emerged from Israeli research. It was genuinely innovative technology, plastic tubing with precision emitters. But unlike the clay pot, drip irrigation came with a business model. Drip systems require installation. They require maintenance. Emitters clog. Filters need replacement. Tubing degrades in sunlight. The system works beautifully, but maintenance is not optional. It is a revenue stream. Companies like Netafim, Rainbird, and Toro built global empires on this model. The drip irrigation market in 2024 is valued at nearly $7 billion. Now, compare the costs. A basic drip irrigation setup for a home garden runs between $200 and $500. That includes the tubing, the timer, the pressure regulator, and the inevitable replacement parts next season. A buried clay jar costs less than $10. You buy it once. You bury it once. There are no filters to clean, no emitters to clog, no electricity to supply. For a manufacturer, this is a nightmare. It is a dead-end product. Once the customer buys it, they never come back. So agricultural extension services began emphasizing modern irrigation. Drip systems became the gold standard in universities. Buried pot irrigation was reframed as a quaint historical curiosity. The implication was clear. Professionals use technology. Amateurs use clay. This was not a conspiracy. It was structural suppression. Industries built on recurring revenue cannot afford to promote methods that eliminate recurring revenue. Reclaiming this technology is almost absurdly simple. It does not require a specialized supplier. It requires a garden center. The process begins with the vessel. Standard, unglazed terracotta, the kind you find in any backyard. You must avoid glazed ceramics because the glaze seals the pores, and the system relies on the clay's ability to breathe. Once you have the pot, you simply plug the drainage hole. A wine cork pressed firmly into the bottom works perfectly, or a dab of food-grade silicone. The goal is a watertight floor with porous walls. Then you return it to the earth. Bury the pot up to its neck, keeping the rim slightly above the soil level so dirt does not wash in. You backfill the soil firmly against the clay. That contact is critical for the tension to work. Finally, cover the opening with a matching saucer or a flat stone to stop evaporation. What you have just built is a sensor-based irrigation system that runs on 0 volts. Fill it with water, plant your crops around the perimeter, and walk away. A 1-liter pot will water a 2-foot circle. Tomatoes, melons, and beans will find the source within days. In the heat of summer, check it once a week. If the water is high, leave it. If it is low, refill it. There is no overwatering. The soil will never take what it does not need. The disappearance of buried jar irrigation from modern agriculture was not the result of better science proving it obsolete. It was the result of economic incentives shaping what we are taught. Drip irrigation is not inferior technology. It is necessary for industrial monocultures where scale matters more than simplicity. But for the home gardener, the small farmer, and the person who wants to grow food without fighting their equipment, the ancient way is superior. The knowledge was not lost. It was made inconvenient to an industry that could not monetize it. But the clay pots do not care about market dynamics. They do not care about patent protection. They work the same way they did 2,000 years ago. Fill them with water, bury them in soil, let physics and biology do the rest. You have a choice. You can invest in a system that feeds an industry, or you can bury a clay pot and feed your garden. The ancient farmers who wrote the first instructions did not have modern materials, but they understood something we forgot. The best technology is the one that requires the least intervention. The jars are still waiting. The technique still works. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. If this story changed how you see the simple clay pot, subscribe to Nature's Lost Vault. We are digging up the survival technology they tried to bury. Plant the future. The next vault opens soon.